Well, good morning, everyone. So I'm just going to get right into it. So we're going to start with Genesis chapter 4, and then we'll finish with Genesis chapter 5. It was good to hear as everybody was joining that I had the right chapters this morning, because that would be not so good if I came with the wrong ones. So chapter 24 starts with, now Abraham was old, well advanced in age, and I'm going to be reading from the Amplified Version. And the Lord had blessed Abraham in all things. Abraham said to his servant Eliezer of Damascus, the oldest of his household, who had charge over all that Abraham owned, please put your hand under my thigh, as it is customary for affirming a solemn oath, and I'll make you swear by the Lord, the God of heaven and the God of earth, that you will not take a wife for my sons from the daughters of the Canaanites, whom I live, but you will go instead to my former country, Mesopotamia, to my relatives, to take a wife for my son, Isaac, the heir of the covenant promise. In the ancient world, it was common to restrict or at least prefer marriage within the social group. In this way, the lineage is isolated for purposes of social status and property ownership. In Israel, the concerns are ethnic because the land was promised to Abraham and his family, and he is avoiding assimilation with the people in the land. At this point in history, no one else shares Abraham's belief or worships the God of Abraham, at least as far as we know. Certainly, Laban and his family do not, so this is not a matter of marrying within the faith. We must keep in mind that Abraham's relatives are no more monotheistic than the Canaanites. They are not worshippers of Yahweh. Abraham was called out of a polytheistic setting, so the prescription here is concerned about ethnic separation. The idea is to maintain the purity of the bloodline. The servant said to him, suppose the women will not be willing to follow me back to this country. Should I take your son back to the country from which you came? Abraham said to him, see to it that you do not take my son back there. The Lord, the God of heaven, who took me from my father's house, from the land of my family and my birth, who spoke to me and swore to me, saying, to your descendants I will give this land. He will send his angel before you to guide you, and you will take a wife from there for my son and bring her here. If the woman is not willing to follow you to this land, then you will be free from this, my oath, and blameless, and only you must never take my son back there. So the servant put his hand under the thigh of Abraham his master and swore to him concerning this matter. Then the servant took 10 of his master's camels and set out, taking some of his master's good things with him. So he got up and journeyed to Mesopotamia, between the Tigris and Euphrates rivers, to the city of Nahor, the home of Abraham's brother. He made the camels kneel down outside the city by the well of the water at the time of the evening when women go out to draw water. And he said, O Lord, God of my master Abraham, please grant me success today and show loving kindness, faithfulness to my master Abraham. Behold, I stand here at the spring of water, and the daughters of the men of the city are coming out to draw water. Now let it be that the girl to whom I say, please let down your jar so that I may have a drink. And she replies, drink, and I'll also give your camels water to drink. May she be the one whom you have selected as a wife for your servant Isaac, and by this I will know that you have shown loving kindness, faithfulness to my master. Here the question is whether the girl whom the servant approaches is the chosen mate for Isaac. The designated indicator of a yes answer is if the girl offers to do far beyond what human nature or the conventions of hospitality would dictate, specifically to water all his camels when he asks only for a drink for himself. So an unusual offer would serve as evidence that the deity was overriding all the natural instinct and social etiquette. We can note here about Rebecca that she was courageous before we talk about her, and a strong, independent woman. She was given the choice, and she's going to say yes. She agreed to go to an unknown place with unknown people. She really does have the heart of a servant. Before Eliezer had finished praying, Rebecca came out with her water jar on her shoulder. Rebecca was the daughter of Bethuel, the son of Milcah, who was the wife of Abraham's brother Nahor. The girl was very beautiful, a virgin and unmarried, and she went down to the spring and filled her jar and came up. Then the servant ran to meet her and said, please let me drink a little water from your jar. And she said, drink, my lord. And she quickly lowered her jar to her hand and gave him a drink. When she had given him a drink, she said, I will also draw water for your camels until they have finished drinking. If the servant's camels had gone several days without water, they could potentially drink 25 gallons, almost 100 liters each. Given the standard size of the vessels used to draw water, this would mean that Rebecca would have to draw 8 to 10 jars for each camel, thus requiring nearly 100 trips from the well. Several hours of work. Since it was already evening when the scene opens, it is sensible to conclude that the camels may have been watered more recently and would have required considerably less water than that. But Rebecca wouldn't have known the current needs of the camels, so the offer remains impressive and extraordinary. So she quickly empties her jar in verse 20 into the trough and ran again to the well and drew water for his camels. Meanwhile, the man stood gazing at Rebecca in reverent silence, waiting to know if the Lord had made his trip successful or not. When the camels had finished drinking, Eliezer took a gold ring weighing a half shekel and 2 bracelets for her hands, weighing 10 shekels in gold, and said, "Whose daughter are you? Please tell me, is there room for your father's house for us to lodge?" She said to him, "I am the daughter of Bethuel, Milcah's son, whom she bore to her husband Nahor." Again she said to him, "We have plenty of both straw and feed, and also room to lodge." The man bowed his head and worshipped the Lord. He said, "Blessed be the Lord, the God of my master Abraham, who has not denied his loving kindness and his truth to my master. For as for me, the Lord led me to the house of my master's brother." Then the girl ran and told her mother's household what happened. Now Rebekah had a brother whose name was Laban, and Laban ran out to meet the man at the well. When he saw the ring and bracelets on his sister's arms, when he heard his sister, saying, "The man said this to me," he went to Eliezer and found him standing by the camels at the spring. And Laban said, "Come in, blessed of the Lord. Why do you stand outside, since I have made the house ready and prepared a place for your camels?" So the man came into the house, and Laban unloaded his camels and gave them straw and feed, and he gave water to Eliezer to wash his feet and the feet of the men who were with him. But when food was set before him, he said, "I will not eat until I have stated my business." And Laban said, "Speak on." So he said, "I am Abraham's servant. The Lord has greatly blessed my master, and he has become great, wealthy, powerful. He has given me flocks and herds and silver and gold and servants and maids and camels and donkeys. Now Sarah, my wife's master, bore a son to my master when she was in her old age, and he has given everything that he has to him. My master made me swear an oath, saying, 'You must not take a wife for my son from the daughters of the Canaanites in whose land I live, but you shall instead go to my father's house and to my family and take a wife for my son Isaac.' Then I said to my master, but suppose the woman will not follow me back to this land." He said to me, "The Lord before whom I walk habitually and obediently will send his angel with you to make your journey successful, and you will take a wife for my son from my relatives and from my father's house. Then you will be free from my oath when you come to my relatives. If they do not give her to you, you will also be free of my oath. I came today to the spring and said, 'O Lord God of my master Abraham, if now you will make my journey on which I go successful, please look, I am standing by the spring of water. Now let it be that when the maiden whom you have chosen for Isaac comes out to draw water, to whom I say, please give me a little water to drink from your jar, and if she says to me, you drink, and I will also draw water for your camels, let that woman be the one whom the Lord has selected and chosen as a wife for my master's son.' Before I had finished praying in my heart, and behold, Rebekah came out with her water jar on her shoulder, and she went down to the spring and drew water. And as I said to her, please let me have a drink, and she quickly let down her jar from her shoulder and said, drink, and I'll also water your camels. So I drank. She also watered the camels. Then I asked her, whose daughter are you? She said, the daughter of Bethuel, Nahor's son, and Milcah bore to him. I put the ring in her nose and the bracelets on her arms, and I bowed down my head and worshiped the Lord, and blessed the Lord, the God of my master Abraham, who has led me in the right way to take the daughter of my master's brother to his son as a wife. So now if you are going to show kindness and truth to my master, being faithful to him, tell me. And if not, tell me. Then I may turn to the right or to the left and go on my way." Then Laban and Bethuel answered, "The matter has come from the Lord, so we dare not speak bad or good to you about it. We cannot interfere. Rebekah is before you. Take her and go and let her be the wife of your master's son, as the Lord had spoken." Verse 52. When Abraham's servant heard their words, he bowed himself to the ground in worship before the Lord. Then the servant brought out jewelry of silver, jewelry of gold, and articles of clothing and gave them to Rebekah. He also gave precious things to her brother and her mother. Then he and the men who were with him ate and drank and spent the night there. In the morning when they got up, he said, "Now send me back to my master." But Rebekah's brother and mother said, "Let the girl stay with us a few days, at least 10. Then she may go." But Eleazar said to them, "Do not delay me, since the Lord has prospered my way. Send me away so that I may go back to my master." And they said, "We will call the girl and ask her what she prefers." So they called Rebekah and said, "Will you go with this man?" And she answered, "I will go." So they sent off their sister Rebekah and her nurse Deborah as her attendant. And Abraham's servant and his men, they blessed Rebekah and said to her, "May you, our sister, become the mother of thousands of 10,000s. May your descendants conquer the city gate of those who hate them." Then Rebekah and her attendants stood, and they mounted camels and followed the men. So the servant took Rebekah and went on his way. In verse 62, now Isaac had returned from going to Beer-lahai-roi. You can pronounce it some maybe a little bit different than I do, but well of the living one who sees me, for he was living in the Negev. Isaac went out to bow down in prayer in the field in the early evening. He raised his eyes and looked, and camels were coming. Isaac wasn't colorful like his father Abraham nor his son Jacob. He was quiet, thoughtful, 40 years old, and still unmarried. His life was primarily an interlude between two high points. In verse 64, Rebekah also raised her eyes and looked. And when she saw Isaac, she dismounted from her camel. She said to her servant, "Who is that man there walking across the field to meet us?" And the servant said, "He is my master Isaac." So she took a veil and covered herself, as was customary. Veils were used in a variety of ways in different cultures and different times, but they always signified something of the woman's status. Some veils might cover only their hair, a scarf or turban, while others covered the lower part of the face. More common, the veil in the ancient Near East covered both the hair and the lower face. These were not made of sheer or gauze. In the Middle East, Assyrian laws, married women or concubines were not to appear in public without face and head veil, whereas veils were prohibited to prostitutes and slave girls. In texts from the ancient Near East, veils are most often mentioned in connection with marriage, as they are here. It is more unusual, however, that the husband veils the wife to be an illegal act. More usual, sorry. In a Mari text from about the time of the patriarchs, when the king's legal emissionaries bring a bride from her country to be presented to the king, her future husband, it is the emissionaries who cover her with a particular garment. In verse 66, the servant told Isaac everything that he had done. Then Isaac brought her into his mother Sarah's tent and took Rebekah in marriage, and she became his wife, and he loved her. Therefore Isaac was comforted after his mother's death. Sarah's status was mistress of the household, and her tent would have been empty since her death. By taking Rebekah into his mother's tent, Isaac demonstrates that she is now the leading woman of the tribe. Now into chapter 25. I'm not going to read a lot of the names in chapter 25. I'm going to skip over some of those. But Abraham took another wife whose name was Keturah. Abraham would have been close to 140 years old at this time. If his marriage to Keturah happened after Sarah died, the descendants of Abraham and Keturah were the first ancestors of certain Arabic tribes, including the Midianites, who were desert wanderers. And it's a note here, Moses' father-in-law, Jethro, was a Midianite priest. Now Abraham gave everything that he had to Isaac, but to the sons of his concubines, Hagar and Keturah, Abraham gave gifts while he was still living, and he sent them to the east country away from Isaac, his son, of promise. The children of concubines did not have the status of legitimate heirs. So a concubine typically brought no dowry, and her children had the status of servants or slaves in the household. They were part of the inheritance rather than recipients of it. So when we hear that he sent them away, thus removing them from any presumed position of privilege, yet at the same time, he gives them freedom and gifts. Gifts of movable property rather than land would be a typical procedure used to consolidate the chief heir's inheritance. For Abraham to provide this for his sons is an unusual generosity that he shows them. In verse 7, the days of Abraham's life were 175 years old. Then Abraham breathed his last, and he died a good old age, an old man who was satisfied with life, and he was gathered to his people who had preceded him in death. This expression finds its roots in ancient views about burial and afterlife. Both the practice of burials and family tombs and the view of continuing social relationships in the afterlife retain the concept of the ancestors as a distinguishable group. One's place in the family of deceased ancestors was just as central to one's identity as one's place in the family in the land of the living. The living family honored the deceased both individually and corporately through a variety of practices that did not stop after burial. In verse 9, so his sons Isaac and Ishmael buried him in the cave of Machpelah, in the field of Ephron, the son of Zohar the Hittite, which is east of Mamre. The field which Abraham purchased from the sons of Heth, there Abraham was buried with Sarah his wife. After the death of Abraham, God blessed his son Isaac. When Abraham died, his estranged sons buried him, but the family strife had hardly been buried with the patriarch. In verse 12, now these are the records of the descendants of Ishmael, Abraham's son, whom Hagar the Egyptian, Sarah's maid, bore to Abraham. Ishmael had 12 sons. Many of the names in this list are of Arab origin. Arab tradition names Ishmael as their ancestor. Ishmael's sons were the ancestors of 12 tribes, just as Israel was later into 12 tribes. In verse 16, these are the sons of Ishmael, and these are the names by their settlements and by their encampments, 12 princes according to their tribes. Down to verse 19. Now these are the records of the descendants of Isaac, Abraham's son. Abraham was the father of Isaac. Isaac was 40 years old when he married Rebekah, the daughter of Bethuel the Syrian of Padan Aram, the sister of Laban the Aramean. Isaac prayed to the Lord for his wife because she was unable to conceive children, and the Lord granted his prayer, and Rebekah conceived twins. At many points in Scripture, God grants a childless woman a family, often in response to prayer. Why give his people such a difficult burden? Because brokenness is God's requirement for maximum blessings and usefulness. But the children struggled together with her, kicking and shoving one another, and she said, if it is so that the Lord has heard our prayer, why then am I this way? So she went to inquire of the Lord, praying for an answer. The Lord said to her, the founders of two nations are in your womb, and the separation of two nations has begun in your body. The one people will be stronger than the other, and the older shall serve the younger. We aren't given much insight into Rebekah's infertility struggle as we got with Sarah's, but note that she could not conceive for 20 years. When God answered Isaac's prayer to let her conceive, though, he did so in duplicate. When Rebekah wondered why her pregnancy was so active, God answered, two nations are in your womb. Even before their births, Jacob and Esau were battling one another, foreshadowing the coming conflict between their two nations, Israel and Edom. According to ancient customs, the younger sons rank below the oldest. Here the Lord is telling Rebekah that the expected order will be reversed. God's actions overrule human laws and customs. When her days are to be delivered were fulfilled, behold, there were twins in her womb. The first came out reddish all over like a hairy garment, and they named him Esau, hairy. Afterward, his brother came out, and his hands grasped Esau's heel, so he was named Jacob, one who grabs by the heel of the supplanter. Isaac was 60 years old when Rebekah gave birth to them. Jacob here is a leader being made usable through brokenness. Natural leaders have it easy, right? Not always. Even leaders gifted with tremendous natural leadership can have a difficult time, especially with issues of character. That was true for Jacob. Even from the beginning, he yielded great influence. No matter what he did or where he went, he stirred things up. He captured the heart of his mother and the birthright of his brother, turning Isaac's household upside down. He had a similar impact on the household of Laban. Over the time, his leadership created great prosperity, and it was his sons who founded the 12 tribes of the Hebrew nation. Wealthy, strong, influential, and blessed with a large family, Jacob seemed to have everything. But a leader who goes his own ways and seeks to benefit only himself cannot be an effective instrument in God's hands. God had to break Jacob to make him useful. In the breaking process, Jacob, the deceiving heel catcher, became Israel, a prince with God who purposed to serve God rather than himself. Natural leaders often need to be broken. Consider your natural ability to lead a gift from God, but your character a gift to present back to God. Remember, every time you stand up under the weight of adversity, you're being prepared, as Jacob was, to better serve God and lead his people. So our first reflection question of the day is, what is God leading you through right now? Remember, you are being prepared better to serve God and lead people. Now, in verse 27, when the boys grew up, Esau was an able and skilled hunter, a man of the outdoors. But Jacob was a quiet and peaceful man living in tents. Now, Isaac loved and favored Esau because he enjoyed eating his game, but Rebekah loved and favored Jacob. Jacob had cooked reddish-brown lentil stew one day when Esau came from the field and was famished. And Esau said to Jacob, "Please let me have a quick swallow of that red stuff there because I'm exhausted and famished." And for that reason, Esau was also called Edom, red. Jacob answered, "First sell me your birthright, the rights of the firstborn." Esau said, "Look, I'm about to die. If I do not eat soon, so what use is this birthright to me?" Esau is a skilled hunter. Is he truly on the brink of starvation, or is he simply using careless hyperbole? The Hebrew word translated die can either be used to describe being famished or experience life-endangering hunger. Giving Esau the benefit of the doubt, we may accept that he believes hunger threatens his life. Nevertheless, the original reading audience would react to Esau's blunt statement with horror, regardless of how extreme his circumstances. Verse 33, Jacob said, "Swear an oath to me today that you are selling it to me for this food." So he swore an oath to him and sold his birthright. Then Jacob gave Esau bread and lentil stew, and he ate and drank and got up and went on his way. In this way, Esau scorned his birthright. In despising his birthright, Esau proved himself godless because he considered filling his empty stomach more important than his spiritual promises of God to Abraham. To avoid making Esau's grave mistake, remember the HALT principle, H.E.A.R.T, that John Maxwell taught. Whenever you are hungry, angry, lonely, or tired, be very careful because you are especially vulnerable to sin. Before making a decision, stop and seek God. The more you give in to your feelings of weakness and look for ways to fill your needs apart from God, then the more you'll reap the terrible consequences. Our second reflection question of the day is, what situation or decision do you need to apply that HALT principle to today? Are there things that are making you hungry, angry, lonely, or tired that you need to step back from and stop and seek God? Influence can be both positive and negative. The Bible tells us that Jacob influenced the birthright away from his brother Esau, the older son. A little later, Rebekah helped Jacob to influence the best blessing out of his father, a boon intended for his brother. It took influence to bring both events to pass. A person could yield influence in many ways. Consider seven such methods, beginning with the worst. Force, by using the use of physical strength to influence others. Intimidation, bullying others verbally or emotionally to get them to act against their will. Manipulation, coercing others to act sometimes against their will. Exchange, giving something in order to receive from others. I scratch your back, you scratch mine. Persuasion, the use of verbal skills to move someone to action. Motivation, energizing others so that they want to act. And honor, communicating esteem to others by serving them, thus inspiring them to act. In Esau, the Bible paints a powerful picture of a leader without vision. While the eyes of some folks may be larger than their stomachs, in this case, the problem was exactly the opposite. Isaac and Rebekah's firstborn son, Esau, loved the great outdoors from very early in life. He became a skillful hunter, growing strong and resourceful, and then rugged as they come. But he lived so completely in the present, depending solely on his own strength and resources, that he repeatedly failed to see the future. Esau succumbed to the kind of temptation that still entices leaders today. Take a look at 6 characteristics of Esau's nearsightedness. 1, Esau focused solely on the here and now, convinced that tomorrow never comes. The second, Esau relied on his natural gifts and his birth order rather than on God's plan. 3, Esau's short-sightedness prompted him to give up the ultimate to get the immediate, a single meal. 4, Esau, favored by his father, may have thought that Isaac's love would bail him out of any poor decision he might make. 5, Esau's limited vision caused him to marry a Hittite, a choice which grieved his parents. 6, Esau's clouded vision blinded him from a deception of his brother Jacob. In a legacy symbol of his life, Esau's descendants became the enemies of Israel. Whether you see the word Edom or read Israel's clashes, whenever you see the word Edom or read of Israel's clashes with the Edomites in Scripture, think of Esau. For it is through him that these persistent opponents of Israel came into existence. The animosity between these two ancient peoples can be seen even in the Psalms. Remember, O Lord, against the sons of Edom, the day of Jerusalem, who said, razz it to its very foundation. Today, remember Esau as a self-centered man with faulty vision. In Hebrews 12, 15, and 16 tells us to examine ourselves, lest there be any fornicator or profane person like Esau, who for one morsel of food sold his birthright. And yet God extends his grace. Before Esau died, he showed that he had matured. Genesis 32 and 33, that we'll hear later on, describe a fearful meeting between Esau and his strange brother. When the pair finally meet after years of separation, Esau embraced the deceiver Jacob and forgives him on the spot. Could it be that before he closed his eyes for the last time, Esau finally saw with clear vision? Perhaps. But imagine what might have been had he developed that vision sooner. So the third and final reflection question today is, what can we do today that will impact our family's legacy? Thank you, everyone.
1 to the 2 and 2 to the 3. Let the world see the Holy Trinity.